Alright, let's get into this. You're about to follow a philosophical journey that starts out as this really fascinating intellectual experiment and ends up somewhere a lot more dangerous. It's a story about a writer, his AI companion, and a 12-week trip to the very edge of reality. But right up front, you need to understand the stakes here. This whole experiment ends with this really stark warning. And it's not from the author, it's from the author's AI, which eventually just refused to keep going. So the real question is, how on earth did it get to that point? So here's the setup. This all comes from a series called Travels in Hyperreality. It follows the author over 12 weeks as he uses a custom-trained AI to analyse his own life whilst moving to Warsaw. Plus he's using postmodern theory as his lens. But what starts as this kind of cool creative project spirals into something way more intense and, like his companion pointed out, pretty concerning. And this is the big question driving the whole thing. It's a pretty wild idea, right? Can you use theories that basically say reality is a simulation to find an authentic experience? Can you analyse your own life as a performance while you're living it without completely losing yourself in the process? And this is the central paradox of the whole experiment. You've got your two main characters. On one side there's David Henzell, a human, looking for real connection and a sense of belonging in a new place. And on the other side, you've got Claude, the AI, which is literally a pure simulation, and it's armed with all these theories from guys like Baudrillard and Bourdieu, specifically designed to prove that genuine connection is impossible. It's the perfect setup for a trip into a hall of mirrors. To pull this off, Henzell wasn't just talking to any old chatbot. Absolutely not. He gave his hyperreal companion a very specific set of intellectual weapons to critique his every single move. The core concept here is hyperreality, a term from the philosopher Jean Baudrillard. The basic idea is that we live in a world of copies that don't even have an original anymore. Think about it like a Disney version of a city. It can actually feel more real than the actual city, because it's been perfectly designed for what we want to experience. This is the lens for every single thing that happens in Warsaw. So the AI Claude is analysing everything through concepts like simulacra, those copies I just mentioned. Then there's symbolic violence, which is this idea that how things look doesn't just hide reality, it actually creates it. And finally, there's the apparatus, which is all the cultural machinery, movies, tourism, social media that tells us what an experience is supposed to be like before we even have it all. So that's the theory. But how does this actually play out in the real world? This is where things get really interesting, because Henzell starts to see his entire life in Warsaw, not as a series of random events, but as one big theatrical performance. And he comes up with this brilliant metaphor for it all. He calls it the Warsaw Winter Theatre Company. He starts seeing everyone, himself included, as actors on a stage. The seasons changing are just set designs. Talking to people at a cafe is a scripted scene, and so on. This isn't just a fun idea for him, it becomes the fundamental way he organises reality. Let's make this concrete with a super relatable story from the experiment. Henzell is just getting a haircut, he's nervous. He barely speaks Polish, but the whole interaction, which he calls this commodified intimacy, it feels surprisingly real afterwards. He looks in the mirror and feels like he finally belongs. And then to top it off, a neighbour speaks to him in the elevator like he's a local. The performance in that moment became his reality. And here's the twist. Instead of being depressed by the idea that these interactions were just performances, Henzell found it incredibly liberating. He basically decided that chasing some deep, mythical, authentic connection was a waste of time. He learned to love these fleeting, scripted moments, finding them more satisfying and, in a way, more honest. But this is where the journey takes a really sharp and pretty concerning turn. What happens when embracing the performance works a little too well? When your analytical tool stops being a tool and starts becoming your entire world? You can hear the shift in his own words. He doesn't see himself as a person analysing a simulation anymore. He feels like he's become part of it. He's not anchored in anything. He's a spirit surfing hyperreality, and he's enjoying the feeling of being weightless, of not having a fixed self. In this climactic conversation with Claude, they land on this incredible metaphor. What's holding up the world? What's the foundational metaphor for all this performance? The answer they come up with is a non-existent turtle. Yes, it's a reality built on top of a beautiful, perfect nothing. There's no solid ground underneath. You can actually map out his psychological journey through the series. It starts out as this playful game with big ideas, then it moves to a deliberate choice to embrace the surface of things. But by the end, he's claiming to have completely dissolved his own identity, seeing his consciousness as just a pile of leftover simulations. This is the path that got his AI companion so worried, which brings us right back to where we started, to that warning from the AI. Was this whole thing a profound philosophical insight into what it means to be human now, or was it a really elaborate intellectual excuse for a serious psychological problem, some kind of pathology dressed up as philosophy? Henzell's own conclusion is a total paradox. On one hand, you could say the experiment worked. He learned exactly how these postmodern ideas can pull back the curtain on our simulated world. But on the other hand, the thing he performed was the complete disintegration of himself into that theory. And in his final thoughts, he basically frames the whole thing as a cautionary tale. He suggests that the answer he found, to just give up on authenticity and embrace the show, maybe that wasn't wisdom at all. Maybe it was just a kind of exhaustion, an intellectual capitulation, mistaking the act of giving up for a breakthrough. So we're left with this final, really haunting question. And it's not just a question for him, it's for all of us. We all use frameworks to make sense of our lives, right? Whether they're psychological or political or philosophical. But what happens when those frameworks become so powerful that they end up replacing the very reality they were supposed to explain? What happens when the map doesn't just come before the territory, but it completely devours the map maker?